Committee, it is gone 10 o'clock. Can we take our seats? Good morning everyone, welcome to today's meeting of Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and today's date is the Thursday the 16th of September and it has just gone 10 a.m. Please can I remind everyone that this meeting is broadcast live. Anyone that wants to take their jacket off, feel free. Some of you have already done that. And we'll get straight into the agenda. Item number 1 is apologies. Jonathan?
Have apologies, Chairman, from Councillor Hayden and Reverend Michael Metcalfe.
Thank you. Are there any further apologies? I think the rest of us are here. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go into item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any to declare members? No? Okay. Item 3, minutes of meeting held on the 23rd of July. Can I sign those as a true record? Moved by Councillor Flunder, seconded by Councillor Smith. Okay, item 4 is the Household Waste Recycling Centres insourcing update and potential changes to the management of reuse items. I'll hand straight over to Councillor Mark DeVille, who will be joined by Councillor Simon Tagg. Over to you, gents.
Yeah, morning Chairman, morning Councillors. If I may, Chairman, there are a few indeed new members to the authority. There are more new members to this select committee, Chairman. So, if I can just give a little bit of background to the discussions that we've had on household waste sites, Chairman. And I've got to say that the work around scrutiny of household waste sites has been a great example of really good, positive scrutiny. Now, I, as you all know, Chairman, place great importance on good scrutiny. I regard it as a positive aspect of my work, and I regard the challenge and the scrutiny of the areas that I cover within my work as being positive, and it really helps me to do my job within my portfolio. It's been scrutinised, this has, on 2 fairly recent occasions. It was scrutinised in November 2020 and scrutinised in February 2021 over the dreaded virtual Teams meetings, and it's really good to be here to see you all and to discuss it in person today, colleagues. Just a little bit of background to the service. I think you'll find that useful. It's a statutory duty to provide waste sites across our county, of which there are 14 waste sites from north to south. And one of the main aims of the waste sites is to capture waste for recycling before the remainder of the waste goes to our waste for energy plants, of which there are 2, at 4 Ashes and of course at Hamford. So this service, Chairman and colleagues, is an absolutely direct public-facing service with about 1.6 million public visits per annum. And indeed, since we reopened, Chairman, following the pandemic, back in May, following the lockdown, since we reopened, there's been over 2 million public visits to our 14 sites. And just to give you an indication, the busiest site that we've got of the 14 is Cannock, with about 240,000 public visits per annum. So we're talking about absolutely customer-facing service. Now, going back about 12 months now, going back to the summer of last year, I was considering the future delivery models of this service, bearing in mind that it's massively front-facing and massively important. And there were a number of options, of course. We either continue to outsource the service, as we do at present. We could look at procuring multiple contracts. That makes it fairly complicated and complex, and maybe a complicated solution to something that's, although public-facing, fairly simple. You know, the requirements of our customers are fairly simple. We could look at setting up a local trading company within the council, such as we've done with Nexus Care. Or we could look at bringing the service back in-house under our control. Now, I felt at that time that we needed greater flexibility to the service. Do we provide a good service? Absolutely, we do. Do we get tremendous amount of complaints about the service that we provide at the moment? No, we don't. It's a pretty good service. Could be a deal better though, Chairman. And I think we needed greater flexibility. I think, and I still think, that we need a greater speed of response. And I think we need a greater degree of control over the operations at the site. So I had and have a real appetite for bringing this service back in-house. So that was discussed, the options was discussed in detail here. And I think, Chairman, you'll remember that there was an overwhelming support from this select committee to in-source, to bring the service back in-house under our control. So moving forward, we took advice from external consultants. We conducted fairly extensive market testing on the options, and we came back to this committee in February. And the recommendation again, the supportive recommendation again, was that we should look at bringing this back in-house and getting greater control over it. So that recommendation went to Cabinet and was passed through Cabinet on the 17th of March. And from that point, Chairman, I said that I'd update this committee on a regular basis. So we were scrutinised, rightly so, and good scrutiny in detail around the options. It's important now, Chairman, now the decision's been made that we are going to bring this back in-house, that we scrutinise the performance, how we are delivering to our customers. Now, my officers, Tim, and the other officers will well know how I work, and I work with certain red lines that we can't cross, or red items that we must satisfy. And I think the red items and the key objectives moving forward are to provide a service that's safe to use and safe to operate, to provide a service that provides very best value for money, a service that can match our customer demand and be flexible, because our demand needs to be flexible. Our demand fluctuates, so the response needs to be flexible. A service that provides very best possible customer, front-facing customer satisfaction. A service that can offer flexibility and a quick response. And obviously, Chairman, a service that supports our primary outcomes. So I think they are good tick points. All of those boxes absolutely have to be ticked. Officers understand that, and that's what we're working towards. I think, Chairman, it's a good, it would be extremely positive and helpful if we looked at scrutinising those key objectives over a period of time, not just now, you know, when we bring the service in-house next year. So it's an interesting and exciting project, Chairman. Following the March Cabinet decision, I wrote to all operational staff, internal and externally, informing them of the direction that we were taking as an authority. And we're very much, I'm happy to say that we're very much on track to bring the complete service back in-house on the 30th of March 2022. That's just a bit of background. That's right up to where we are now. If I may now bring Councillor Tagg in, Chairman, to take us forward into where we go from here, you know, in future scrutiny. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Completely back what you say about the scrutiny around this item. I was a member of the Scrutiny Committee with Tina and others before the May election when the decision was made to in-house this, and I think it was the right decision to make. And as Mark has pointed out, he's been working on making that happen, and it will start, as you say, next spring. But from my portfolio's point of view, which is the operational side of it, we've had a group of officers that have been looking at the transition back into in-house for council control. And one of the items they brought forward, which is here for discussion today, is the management of the reuse items. I think this is a good news story as it is at the moment. Obviously, the partnership with the Catherine House Hospice since 2013, 150,000 items collected each year from across our sites, and 80% of those being offered for sale. I think when we look at recycling, ultimately, the most successful recycling is when things get used again. As they get, used by people, across the county. And I think that's a really good way of recycling, ultimately. I mean, the options here, which are in the report, which you'll see under 16, is we could actually make a lot more of this and make this even more successful. There's a number of potential operating models under 16 that could complement the work we're doing with the Catherine House Hospice, perhaps benefiting more charities across the county in different areas. There's even a recommendation there, or not a recommendation, an option for even benefiting the chairman's charity in a way, the chairman of this county council. So it'd be interesting to hear members' views on those during the debate. I think also we're on the start of a journey, aren't we, on bringing this in-house. And I think along the way, obviously our staff, both me and Mark, will actually getting hands-on and going out to see some of these sites to see how we can enhance them further and get the best recycling rates out of them and the best service for the residents of the county. And also, obviously, safe and secure operation for our staff as well. We've all been to these sites. It can get very chaotic, and some of them aren't the best sited ones. I can talk about the one in Newcastle. At least it isn't the best access arrangements there, for example. So there's a review that will take place into that over the longer term. But the report is as it is in front of you. Tim Cooper, who's sitting to my right, who Mark referred to, is the officer that has wrote the report and can give any background information on it if members wish to. But I'm sure me and Mark are willing to take questions and also your comments on board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just quickly, could you just give me some insight as to how the reuse for, especially with Catherine House, was set up? How did that come about? I know I go to my tips in a different organisation. I go over to Sutton Coalfields because the one at Dordon's always full and you have to pre-book. The one at Sutton Coalfield, I can just turn up and go. And they've got a recycling centre there. I'm not sure how it works, or so just a little bit more insight into how that works with Catherine House and how that came about, please.
Obviously, the contractual arrangements have been in place since 2013, but I'm sure Tim could give some more background on that, how it operates in practice.
Yeah, the Catherine House contract was originally set up with our previous contractor, FCC, and it was largely managed through our previous contracts for about 5 years, and we had a very light touch on that contract. Basically, how it works is each site has its own container. It's quite a large container, a shipping container, and as residents come in with items, the site staff can ask them if they're worth reusing, if they're broken or anything. If they're not, and the members of the public are happy, they can put them into those reused containers, and they'll then get transported down to our Cannock site where there is a shop, and that's where they get sold on to the public. When we took over, when Amy took over, it allowed us more transparency around the arrangements with Catherine House and what was in place, and we've been largely maintaining them. But obviously, with the current contract coming to an end, we've got to try and work out what are the better arrangements, and there probably are some better arrangements. Certainly, looking at what goes on in the site at Dordon, it probably is a better arrangement in some ways than our own.
Thank you very much. I'll be interested to see that go forward. I think that's a really fabulous idea. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair. Question, well, first of all, I'll make a little statement about the Newcastle recycling. I've never been asked if anything is of value, and I've seen pretty decent furniture go into the wood skip. So recycling isn't necessarily as well run as it perhaps might be. But second, my main point though is Staffordshire is a very large county, and I think we should be doing as much as possible to reduce the mileage that vehicles travel. Taking stuff from Newcastle down to Cannock, for example, is, and that's a two-way journey, adds to climate change. And I think we should, as a council, we should be doing everything in our power to reduce unnecessary journeys. So, although I've got nothing against Catherine House whatsoever, I think it's great that stuff goes to charity. But perhaps going to charities that are closer to the recycling sites is it still goes to charity, and perhaps it will go to more charities. But I think that would be, we should add that in. And thank you very much, Chair.
Mark DeVille, did you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chairman. Really good point. And I'm glad that is, you know, we started the scrutiny of this, because that's one of those 8 red lines that I was speaking on, one of our key objectives, to make the very most of recycling. Do we do a good job on recycling? I'd say so. I think we do. Could we do better? Absolutely. Yeah, of course we could. So that comment is very, very well received, Chairman. Reduce unnecessary transit. You're right. That does affect, you know, transportation of diesel-powered vehicles from the north of the county to the south of the county does affect our environment, you're right. Also, there's a real opportunity there for localisation, and I'm all for that, Chairman. As Tim mentioned, the arrangement with Catherine House has worked well. They operate their shop with their own expenses. They've got their own business expenses. So I think it's fair to say, colleagues, that we're honing in on this now. We've sort of let that run. It goes to a very, very good cause, Catherine House, and we've sort of let that run under the operation of the people who are operating the sites. Now, I think we see that there's other opportunities here. I think we need more control on that, and absolutely I can think of 10 good local charities very, very close to where you are that those items could go to. And that's one of the other key objectives, Chairman, to look at making the most of our recycling and looking at making the most of this really good news opportunity for local charities. Thank you, Councillor Orton.
Thank you, Councillor DeVille. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There's something which at the moment goes on well in some places and not so well in others, and I'm not so sure whether as part of our new arrangement we should be able to formalise anything, particularly with the problems that we've had with COVID. But at my local Lichfield centre, we have some people who are very, very helpful in helping, particularly ladies, to unload the boots of their cars. I'm not so sure that's actually part of the contract of what they should actually be doing, but have just been over helpful. And I don't know whether it's possible that we can look at some way that assistance can be given. I suspect probably not, Chairman.
Councillor Mark DeVille.
I suspect that we probably can, David, and I think you make a really important point about consistency. And you know, that's one of the reasons why I see benefits in bringing this in-house and getting greater control around it, so that we can totally focus on customer needs, so that we can provide. And I've got to say that our staff, during COVID, at the end of the first lockdown, when we reopened, when we were just sort of engulfed with vehicles at all sites, our operatives, all of them across the county, performed magnificently. They really played their part and worked hard. Do we need greater consistency? Yes, we do. And again, that is one of the key objectives that we have and the key objectives that we'll measure and we'll scrutinise. So, Councillor Smith, thank you. Very, very good point. Duly noted.
Councillor Flunder.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points I'd like to sort of bring to the attention of people is I know that we want to try and do things better in the future. So whether or not you could sort of come back to a future meeting of this committee to try and find out the ways of improving some sort of management measurement of, you know, how we adopted the service and what sort of overall strategy we're trying to get and what sort of management measures are going to be in place to say how well we're doing in one way or another. So I think that sort of goes with the whole overall option of things. And then in terms of the reuse items and everything else, which I fully endorse and think we should be doing that way just for the environmental issues and everything else like that. I do like the comments made by Councillor Hutton as well, is the fact that I do think we need to make them more local. And maybe, I know that item 16D was about the chairman's charities of this organisation, but maybe you could link across to the district councils as well and ask the chairman of those district councils for their involvement within the process, and then that would maybe make people a bit more aware of any future projects we might come up with to try and green the whole thing up and to bring everybody on board on the tiering and working closer together on that front. So I think they're my 2 comments. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report and excellent presentations and your explanations as well. I know it's a series of, as you did before the elections as well, in this issue. What I feel so pleased to see there is an issue regarding the carbon mile, Madam Chairman, that you need to reduce the carbon mile to, you know, enhance the fight against this climate change, which is definitely a good way forward. On this note, can I just quickly touch 3 points here? If I would be grateful if you can, cabinet member can assist me, please. Is there any estimated amount of figure available to revenue produced from the sale of these reusable items? Any rough figures? And secondly, I went through the report which shows that only Canopy Chase got the reselling facility at the moment. So what more can be done to get this facility in other districts of the county? And finally, thirdly, that may we consider that amount you mentioned that could generate from this selling of reusable items, can we think of it to evenly distribute to the 61 councillors so that we can support those small charities, especially if they have proven themselves in this crisis, you know, the trusted and tested partners in our community efforts. Thank you.
Councillor Ian Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Couple of points, if I may. My local in Biddle tip, for want of a better word, is Bemersley. And as you know, within 15 minutes, 20 minutes away, Congleton tip is now closing, which is going to put, I would imagine, quite a load of more rubbish being tipped at Bemersley. I also know that that we are about 10 minutes away from Stoke, and quite a few of their residents also use the Biddle tip. Are you going to sort of limit people coming to R14 tips who live in the area, or are you just going to see how it flows and how it copes with? The second one is staffing. In 2024, when we take over, will you be offering the present officers who run these tips and seem to run them very, very well, especially my own tip at Bemersley, will you be offering them positions with the county? Thank you.
Councillor DeVille, did you want to come in there?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Thank you, Councillor Lawson. if I can just address Councillor Lawson's comments first, Chairman, please. You were right, Ian. Bermondsey Tip is extremely busy now. There's about 110,000 visits per annum to the Biddle site. And yet, will we get busier? I guess we will, which is no bad thing, Chairman. What's key to this is how we handle extra work within each location. So one of our key objectives, as I said earlier, is to make it more customer focused, to provide a better service to our customers. That's essential, but also to be more fleet of foot. We may need to very quickly change operating hours. We may very quickly, Ian, need to change operating procedures. Bringing it back in-house will do that. So the answer to your question is yes. By bringing it back in-house, we are more reactive, and we'll be able to react to the peaks of user visits, Chairman. All operatives will be transferred over in the normal TUPE means, Ian. And you know, future operations of these sites, is it about the locations? Is it about buildings? No, it isn't. It's about people. It's our people who will make this work. All of our operatives have taken this on board in a really, really positive manner. We've got a bit more work to do, of course, Chairman, on the transition, but in answer to your question, Ian, yeah, they'll absolutely be transferred over to the employment of the County Council, which will give us the benefits that I spoke of earlier. Mr. Hussain made 3 really good points. It's something, you know, it's something that we'll look at. We may be able to generate some environmental fund that we can divvy up to all 61 members and give us something certainly that we'll think about. And I know Tim's made a note of it, and that is something that we can certainly consider, Simon, yeah? So that we can then contribute around the county to good causes, particularly with environmental themes. So that's certainly something worth thinking about, Mr. Hussain, and we will do. We'll pursue that. Tim's made a note. Could you just address the financial question that Mr. Hussain had about recycling items, Tim, please?
Yeah, I think you're asking a question around the carbon footprint of reselling these items and how is that calculated. We have got a carbon footprint for the whole of the council's waste service, and we have that broken down into just the household waste network as well. We haven't broken it down to the actual reuse and individual elements of the materials as far as I'm aware, but it is something that we can look at and try and sort of put a carbon value to the value we're actually selling. We have done individual items. I know we did it on bikes and where the bikes end up and that gets sent off to reuse, but we haven't gone to that level just yet, but it is noted and we'll look into it on the next round of carbon monitoring.
Councillor Hudson, did you want to ask a question? Your mic's been on, sorry.
Yeah, I think that we're now living in an age of where we're looking at sustainability and climate change, and we're moving from a society of make, do, and mend to a society of throw away. So it's very important, and I'm glad that we've taken this on board now. I think that we ought to look at perhaps having a panel of charities each year, because there's a lot of charities that have struggled over the last 2 years to raise money, and I think the environmental side of things is excellent as well. I would think that we would be better running the service internally, because we'll get a better level of service across the county. It should be more uniform, and you should get the same service at each of our tips. So very welcome this report, and I would very much support it. Thank you.
Councillor Tagg, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you. I mean, some really good points come forward. As Mark has said, we'll take these on board, really. I think Councillor Hussain, one of his points was about having those selling facility, you know, the shop, so to speak, across the county instead of just in one place. And that's what we want to aim for out of this, and that will tie in with the local charities and, you know, local recycled materials staying in the local area and being used again by local people. That's going to cut down on the carbon, isn't it, and the travel distances, which Councillor Hutton raised, and they're the wins out of this, aren't they? You know, more for local charities, more recycled and reused, and less, you know, carbon into the atmosphere by these things being shuttled around the county. So there's some really good points come forward, Chair. And just that point we made at the beginning about further report, which Councillor Flunder mentioned, yes, that's I think is going to happen and come forward to this this committee. And probably early next springtime will be a good time to bring forward when we're just about to take over, and we can give an update on the findings of myself and Mark on ways we can improve, and ask, you know, your advice if there's anything else we should do on the eve of taking over.
Councillor DeVille.
Just to add to Simon's comments, Chairman, I'm excited by this. I think it's an exciting prospect to bring this back in-house. It's also a big project. It's not without pressures. So again, I say, councillors, that I really, really value your scrutiny and your challenge. And there's some really good points come out of this morning's session. We'll look to do this on a fair, well, as often as you want, Chairman, really, but I think a time scale of, you know, sometime maybe just before the live date in April, it'd be appropriate to give you an update on where we are with regard to opening, and then fairly regular sessions, if it's okay with you, Chairman and members, on updating how we're performing. Maybe so, you know, areas of attention, areas for improvement, and as always, both myself and Simon and officers will gladly receive that feedback and that scrutiny, Chair. It's very, very useful and helps us do a job.
Thank you, Mark. Obviously, we'll look at our work programme. It is quite busy coming into January going forwards with some big items. So myself and the two vice chairs and the scrutiny officer will look at where we can fit you back in before April. Obviously, we've all seen the report. We've heard the presentation from Mark, Simon and Tim this morning. We've all been given the opportunity to feed into that. Everyone's asked their questions and put their comments in. And we have two recommendations, the first one being to note the progress with the transition of the household waste recycling centres from an outsourced to an in-source provision, and we can all agree that that's a good thing and we all welcome that coming back into house. And the second one is consider how we think the benefit of reuse items should be managed in the future and what delivery models should be taken forward for further discussion. I think out of today's meeting we've all agreed that going forward, excuse me, we need more local sites, we need more local charities involved, and as Councillor Hussain has said, we need to cut down that carbon footprint to help our climate change agenda. So yeah, going forward, I think that's where we need to be, and I welcome this coming back early next year when we can fit it onto the work plan. So if everybody is happy with that, we'll note those two recommendations. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you. Now our next agenda item is the 20 miles an hour speed limits, and our two presenters aren't here. They're not coming till 11. So if it's okay with members and the cabinet member, we'll go straight on to item 6 and come back to the 20s plenty of after. So we'll go straight on to Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership. Councillor David Williams.
Just loading up because I've got the other one ready. So.
Sorry, I've put you on the spot there, Councillor. Obviously, our two presenters are not here yet, so.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, basically, today I'm happy to bring this for scrutiny today with regards to our Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership. The committee today is being asked to recognise the government structure and the operating model of the Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership. It is being asked to, with the committee members who are invited, to consider the wide range of initiatives used to promote road safety across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, with regard to the 4 E's, which is education, engagement, engineering and enforcement. And it's also requested that the Select Committee recognises and supports the need for ongoing review and development of road safety measures to continue to reduce road casualties. I'll hand over now to Mary-Ann for if you need any extra input on this, but I think from the Staffordshire and Safer Road Partnership, just to ensure that you know that it is not a county council run unit, it is a partnership unit, and Staffordshire County Council is part of that unit. Thank you.
Mary-Ann, did you want to come in?
Just to follow on from what Councillor Williams has said, is that there are a number of partners that make up the Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership. There's a focus on a number of road safety engineering, education, enforcement activities, and just to note the recommendations for further scrutiny.
Thank you, Mary-Ann. Any questions from members? Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair. If a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit came in, if people were allowed to, you know, parishes were allowed to put forward that, is it, would the legal costs of that come, would it every time that a parish put in their area
Councillor Hutton, we're doing 20 mile an hour after this one.
But I thought 20 mile an hour is part of road safety as well, is it not?
It's going to be the next item, so if you want to save your comments for then.
I'll take it next item then, thank you. Councillor
Smith.
Chairman, I was partly going to come on to that point, but I would just generally have made the comment that our highways fund that we have as members, the cost of works that we want to put in place locally is so high that you probably can only do one project a year, whatever that project may be. And I think that a look at the way that particularly things like traffic surveys, and I do a traffic survey every 4 years in my division, and what that allows me to do is to produce statistics over a 7-day period, 24 hours a day, on the weight of vehicles using the roads in my division, the speed of vehicles and the time of vehicles. And so that becomes a statutory document which has been very, very useful when we've looked at planning applications. But to meet the cost of that is a great chunk out of my road fund. And I just wonder whether, if we're looking at how we're having local strategies for the management of highways and where we can look at in terms of progress and the impact of planning, I think that would be very useful. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hudson.
Yeah, I work very closely with Community Speedwatch in Uttoxeter, and we have identified quite a few hotspot areas within Uttoxeter. Some of our making, like Stafford Road, has now been reduced from a 40 to a 30 mile an hour speed limit. We are recording 50 vehicles an hour in that location over the speed limit. Highest speed 63, so it's well over the 40. And what I need, you see, we only get £7,000 locally to spend, and we need some more enforcement there. The police have been excellent in the last few weeks. We've been out with Speedwatch, the police have been out with their mobile camera, and within half an hour they'd reported 12 motorists. But we can't have repeaters in the road because the law says that if if it's the street light is less than a certain distance, it's a restricted road, you should know it's 30. But however, this has caused us some concerns. But in New Road, because that is actually on the enforcement route, we can have repeaters with the cameras underneath, and they put some up last week. So I would like, to know who can I go to get Stafford Road very quickly put on to the route. Not weeks, we need it now because it is dangerous down there. We're out every week with Speedwatch, and I go out personally myself, being an ex-police officer. I can use the equipment quicker and read the number plates because it's that bad. You're sometimes recording 3 vehicles a minute. We have some SID signs that I have contributed to from my DHP money, and the Town Council and Uttoxeter have contributed to. It costs us £4,000 for a pair of those, and then it costs us £200 or £300 to get them sited with the poles and everything. I have to have an officer from the County Council to come out and say an okay where we're going to put them. Then we've got to get permits to dig. So I understand that a few years ago there was a fund within the Safety Road Partnership to fund these. Can we have that back? Because in Uttoxeter we could do with more. I can't afford to help pay for them. I can only help so much a year, and we've identified, Councillor Williams will know that we did identify a problem in New Road, but by the good work that the County Council have done, the Town Council, the Community Speed Watch and the police, we have now alleviated that we've got some SID signs there. But if I move them, I fear that we'll go back to where we were. We'll then start getting a certain resident sending us 3 emails a week, which we had, which we don't have now. So can we please look at, if we could have some more funding now for these speed indicator devices, because they do work. And the other thing I'd like to ask you is, I go to quite a number of the bikers' breakfasts, being a very keen motorcyclist myself. How much do they cost us to put on, and are they effective? Because I go to some, and I go around all the stores and meet everybody, and it's great, and I think a lot of people get a lot out of it. But, how effective is it, and how much does it cost us? Thank you.
Councillor Williams, do you wish to respond?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there's been little bits of overlap with what we're talking about with the Safer Roads Partnership and actually highways. So the Safer Roads Partnership is a group and a partnership which is looking at how we make our roads safer. It's fully funded by itself by basically as it used to be the offenders. So when people go on to the courses, that is what funds the Safer Roads Partnership. So unfortunately it's not within the County Council's remit to start saying that this is what we can use and what it is for funding. When it comes, being Cabinet Member for Highways, I can say that the traffic counts and the DHP are completely separate to the Safer Roads Partnership unless members actually want to contribute into that. Everything that you do, that is through highways rather than that. And the SIDs, the County Council was putting out temporary SIDs to highlight speed issues, but unfortunately they do cost a lot of money. And both the fitting and the insurance of them and the continued maintenance. So it is down really to local areas to highlight this, and local either town, boroughs or parishes to pay for them. Personally, my small parish of Sardin have just bought one, and it's made a massive difference on the A4601. So that is the case where we are looking at with funding. When it comes to the bikers' breakfasts and the initiatives that the group are putting on, what we're trying to do is highlight issues to certain specific groups. One of those is obviously motorcyclists. Being an ex-motorcyclist myself, and being a fireman, I have seen the horrors of what happens when people on motorcycles get injured. But I will have to say that what we're trying to do is highlight and prevent that in the first place, and that's what they're for. Effectiveness-wise, again, it's one of those very difficult ones where you would say how effective they are, but the fact that if it stops one person, and as I say, it's funded by people who have broken the law and offenders, then basically if it stops one person being injured, then I think it's better than nothing. But I know that, as I say, it's not something that we have complete control on, and it is something that we feed into. So I don't know if there is any statistics on how the bikers' breakfasts are being taken up or what difference that makes. But I will point out that Staffordshire is one of the safest roads in the country. It is on a downward trend, and we have to be mindful of that, but also mindful of making sure that it doesn't go up, and looking after and educating the people that we are trying to protect. Anything else, Marianne?
Marianne, did you want to come in?
Just to follow on with the bikers' breakfast events, they're largely run by volunteers. So there's an absolutely fantastic cohort of volunteers who help with all of the road safety initiatives through the SSRP. And they're very, very well attended. So motorcycle activities are one of our priorities, and the priorities are set through accident analysis, so very factually based. With regard to the fund, the community grant fund, that is starting again this autumn. So it's got a £50,000 budget allocation starting again this autumn. Then in terms of getting, I think it was that you were referring to the mobile safety cameras being deployed. Obviously communities can make those requests through the SSRP website, and there's a number of assessments that have to be made to see if it's a suitable location. But we've got a significant number of locations across the county where the mobile vans are regularly deployed on a sort of risk management basis. A number of assessments that have to be made to see if it's a suitable location. But we've got a significant number of locations across the county where the mobile vans are regularly deployed on a sort of risk management basis.
I was going to say that was really well done, Mary. Your lips didn't move. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Mike, can you... Mr. Barr, I believe you have your computer on. If you could turn it on off for us. Just the camera and the sound, please, as it's interfering with the rest of the meeting. I believe he's now done that. Sorry, Councillor Hudson, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I'm quite well aware of I'm a member of the Institute of Advanced Motorists and Litchfield Group, and we come up regularly to them. So that's brilliant. I am interested in the grant funding because I could do with applying for Utoxeter to get some more SID signs up to come and help us. So say I've been using my DHP money to help the town council to buy them. As regards the Mark Joynson, I met Inspector, he came out while we were on speed watch a couple of weeks ago, so he knows how bad Stafford Road is now. So I've sent him an email. So we will be asking you to have a look at it, to put it on the routes. The problem is it's probably not an easy place to put the camera van, but they have this handheld camera, and I understand we're having another new one coming in the next few weeks. But you know, thanks very much for all the support that you give us, and we will in turn support you as well and our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Flunder.
Thank you. Sorry, David, I was just going to say I was going to support you in this, and the new members might not be aware of how this potentially might work. Certainly for me, and what I've done in the past, I've looked at certain issues that residents have brought to me, and I've done some road safety schemes both in between Endon and Brown Edge, which has been very much supported by the officers concerned, and also then onto the capital programme, and managed to get new crossings in. I've managed to get other things sorted out and even reduce speed limits and things like that. My comments really are more to do with the healthier and independent for longer ideas around walking and cycling, and also being happier and safer within the communities. And that's all around safety around schools as well, which is another working group that I'm working with at the moment. The officers have allowed me to put some money towards those particular projects, and I'm hoping that they will lead on to ideas and suggestions from the residents and from the local councillors, which will hopefully provide better, safer environments in relation to road safety. Doesn't necessarily all relate to speed. In fact, most of the ones I'm dealing with at the moment to do with congestion. And unfortunately, there was a child that was killed just over the border in Stoke. And so Brown Edge Parish Council meeting, I believe, will be asking the Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership to actually come and do a presentation for them as well. So that will then link up with the working group that I'm doing with Brown Edge Parish Council as well. And I do believe that the idea of doing surveys and things will be supported by the DHP fund if it's done in an appropriate manner, and it's related to road safety in particular. So, as I say, there is that you can, but to try and do it in such a way that it makes sense for people, and you get evidence to be able to support all the issues that you might have to bring forward with any one particular scheme. So I hope that that will continue. That was my question in relation to this particular item, and that will be allowed to continue over the coming years, because I think that's a very important aspect of what's going on. And I do believe that if you link it within the communities themselves, it actually provides also a very good way of communicating all the issues and concerns, And if, as David said, even if it just relates to reducing one child injury or anything like that, then I believe that we're doing the best that we can within the strategy and the structure of the county council. So sorry if I've taken anything of that, but I just wanted to ask the question that we'll be able to continue doing that. That was my question, I suppose. So thank you, David.
You wanted to come back in, yeah?
Is that okay? There's no current plan to remove the DHP, and yes, you work with your scheme if you wish to carry out traffic counts and so forth. They have changed slightly. They aren't always the lines that go across the roads now. These are new type of cameras that can actually be placed in areas, and basically that can do the traffic count even more efficiently and tell us what type of vehicles and their speeds and so forth. And when it comes to the funding, obviously that funding is there. The PFCC, as he is now, is also an area where there are funds. I believe it's usually twice a year where they operate a funding system, and I know that from my little parishes that they have applied and obtained funding for several road safety schemes, including getting speed watch cameras out of the PFCC's funds. So if people are looking for funds, I think that would be an ideal way to look at it. But I will remind everybody it's not the county council that actually enforces speed. It is the police. That is their remit, and it is not the county council. So it will not be to us to start enforcing speed. But when we have highlighted areas where we've got issues, that's where a traffic count statistics from the police would be useful, and then that's when you, from a DHP point of view, members can then actually look at working with local parishes or town councils to see whether or not speed changes or road changes are needing to be implemented.
Councillor Smith.
Chairman, can I pick up on that? Together with my parish councils, of which I have 5, we came forward with a scheme which would have been a camera check on vehicle speeds and their registration numbers, so that they could be followed up by the police and given automated letters on the basis that they were exceeding the speed limit. It could all have been done via a computer. It didn't need any manual intervention, but the police declined to cooperate with us over it, which I felt very disappointed, because I have major rat running problems, and it seemed to me to be a long way towards a solution to that problem. But the police are the only people that can deal with the data, because it's data protected, and they decline to do anything about it. I find that extremely disappointing, and you know, it ties our hands over what we might be able to do as local members in serving our communities. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Hussain, can I just ask that you move your microphone closer to you?
It's better now, yes. We're getting used to it, thank you. Right across, even in my divisions as well, enforcement is always an issue, and what the Cabinet member is saying, that it is solely for the police to enforce the law, and we understand that. The question is that from the council, what more can be done to ask the police to give us more support in this? And they're doing a tremendous job. I believe that quantity of their force is an issue always, but what we find in my area is like urban built-up area, and people use it nothing but sometimes a racing track. Especially they got some car garages, and they do use this one for testing drive as well, which is horrendous when small children are also doing. So I'm really glad to see that we got one of the safest road in the country, but we want to do our best, better best. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson.
Yeah, so the way around it is that you work in partnership with your police. What we did was we set up the community speed watch, and effectively we record the registration numbers of the people that are over the speed, their speed, and I send them in every day to Staffordshire Police to the Stafford Road Partnership, who then put them on a computer. Letters are then sent out. We have a number of people who've had 2 or 3 letters, so they then get a visit. We can even record people who've given us abusive language and things like that. And it's very effective. I get a report from Staffordshire Police that tells me how many vehicles that we've checked, what the speeds were, how many people have had letters, and things like that. They have to come out and designate those roads because they have to do health and safety checks for our safety as well as members of the public. So we can't always do a check in every road where people might be speeding, but you know, it's working in partnership with the local police. It's like, you know, Councillor Flunder was on about other initiatives. I've got an initiative this week at the side of Thomas Lane School in Back Lane where the police are down there. I put an article in the paper and we've been issuing letters this week to people using it, and we will later be enforcing it. I have a long-term solution that I'll be coming to Councillor Williams with later in the year for some money next year to deal with it. But and that's how it works. You work in partnership with your local police. I've got very good contact in Uttoxeter now. I didn't have, but I have now, and we work together on different issues.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on Councillor Hudson's comments. We've got a really successful speed watch in Tamworth, and our PCSO comes out with us every time she's on duty to enforce what we're seeing. So it does work. And yes, you can record the abusive language on the sheet as well, which goes to police headquarters, and an automated letter is sent out. So I welcome the Safer Roads Partnership Report, Councillor Williams and officers, and the recommendation that the Select Committee is recommended to scrutinise the Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership. I think we've done that today. I think Councillor Williams has got a few comments that he can take back to the partnership itself, as we are only a member. And I think it might be useful in future to have the Safer Roads Partnership come and present to us, just to give us some updated feedback on what's actually going on across our county, if members are happy with that. So, sorry, Councillor Williams.
Happy to get to organise that for you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, later on next year. If members are happy with that, all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Okay, I think we have Mr. Jones and Mr. Barr online. Yes? If you can both switch on your camera, and whoever's speaking, switch on their microphone. And they are going to present to us on the next agenda item, which is a proposal for scrutiny review, 20 miles an hour speed limits. Can I remind you that you've got 15 minutes to present, and then we'll go to questions from members, and then we will have the Cabinet members' response. Over to, is it Mr. Jones speaking?
No, it'll be me first, if that's okay. Can you see me?
Mr. Barr, yeah, you can put your camera on now.
Have I put my camera on? Yeah.
I can see you, Mike.
Can you see it? Thank you. Right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name's Mike Barr. I live in the north of the county in Newcastle, and I'm the coordinator for this 2020 for Staffordshire group, and who support the aims of the national campaign 2020 for Us. With me this morning is Phil Jones, who lives in the south of the county in Kinver, and he is our technical lead campaigner. Our presentation today is about the benefits that having a policy of widespread 20 mph limits in existing 30 mph areas can bring to, and in summary, they make areas better places to live in by reducing road casualties, traffic noise and pollution, and making us generally safer, healthier and nicer environment for walking and cycling, particularly for children and older people. Councils across the UK are increasingly adopting wide area 20 mph speed limits where communities want this. Some councils have already achieved a really remarkable reduction in road casualties of 20% and more. And we urge the committee to look at what these councils have achieved and suggest what aspects of their approach might be appropriate for future Staffordshire policy on 20 mph. National surveys show that 20 mph speed limits are popular with residents and around 70% in favour. And we believe that villages and towns across Staffordshire deserve the opportunity to choose 20 mph if their communities want this. Councillor David Williams has prepared a report for committee giving the context to the Council's current approach to 20 mph limits. However, it appears to give low priority to the use of 20 mph and doesn't recommend any clarification or review of the policy. If the Council doesn't review its policy, then we believe the Council will be missing out a real opportunity to bring the proven benefits of 20 mph to Staffordshire residents. And that's why we're asking the committee to scrutinise this. Unless there are any questions at this stage, I'll be handing on to Phil Jones, who can deliver our presentation.
Thank you, Mike. I hope, can everyone see the screen, the presentation?
Yeah, we can see it.
Fantastic, thank you very much, that's great. So just to introduce myself, so I'm a resident of Kimber, as Mike said. I've lived in Staffordshire most of my life and Kimber for the last 28 years. I'm a transport planner and engineer. I head up my own consultancy, which advises the private and public sectors, including national government. And recently, I chaired a task force for the Welsh Government, which advised how to bring in a national default 20-mile-an-hour limit for built-up areas in Wales. In a voluntary capacity, I'm a chair of the Kimber Eco Collective, which is working to make the village more sustainable. And the Eco Collective, in partnership with the Parish Council, is carrying out a feasibility study looking at the potential for Kimber, which is about 7,000 people, to go 20 miles an hour. And we have the support of Councillor Wilson in that work. We've spoken to Councillor Williams. We're very pleased that he's happy to consider 20 miles an hour if there's local support, and that's something we're working on. But essentially, there's no county funding, there's no programme. It's effectively a permissive, but there's no encouragement or support for local communities. So as Mike said, we think Staffordshire's falling behind on best practice, and we're hoping the committee will look into it. And we're very happy to work collaboratively on that matter. But just to quickly run into the presentation. So what's the benefit of 20 miles an hour? Just to make the point, we're talking here about 20 limits, not zones. Zones are small areas with traffic calming, typically just a few streets. We're talking about limits that are just signs and markings for the most part and cover much wider areas, including the whole of some settlements have gone 20 now. And they've been supported by government policy since 2013. And during COVID-19, the government published some updated statutory guidance, which was further encouragement for 20 mile an hour speed limits, as it says there, for residential roads and many through streets in built-up areas. And that can provide a more attractive and safer environment for walking and cycling. So it's not just safety, it's about the whole environment. This is Kimber High Street, 20 zone, quite small. I worked on the original traffic calming scheme when I was a first resident of Kimber. And it's been very successful, but it is very limited. What we're looking for is to simply change the speed limit without the need for expensive changes to the road, and that can still be very effective across a wider area, as I'll explain. So what are the benefits? Well, effectively, it's just saying that people are taking precedence now, but clearly there's many fewer casualties. As Mike said, the percentage reduction is quite significant. It enables walking and cycling, zero carbon travel, lots of health benefits and social benefits. It gets more people out of their doors, meeting their neighbours. It all helps to build stronger communities. That independent mobility is really important for children and older people who maybe can't drive. Less noise, better air quality. And as Mike said, it's popular. It makes local high streets more pleasant if the traffic speeds are less. And overall, we think it will help to make Staffordshire a better place to live, to work and to visit. It's not just about road safety. But road safety, it's really important to understand that the success of 20 miles an hour is not dependent on heavy enforcement. Even small reductions in speed have a very marked reduction in collisions. The research that was done by the Transport Research Laboratory some years ago now talked about a 1%, even a 1 mile an hour reduction in speed leads to a 6% reduction in collisions on average. So even quite small reductions, if we take the speed, say, from 32, 33 down to 26, 27, that's still highly significant in terms of the benefits for road safety. And the speed reductions are greatest on the fastest roads, something I'll come back to. If we artificially only put 20-mile-an-hour limits on roads where the speeds are already slow, we're missing a massive amount of benefits. But that compliance is expected to increase over time. Just to give you, there's lots of stats about this, and we all know that the risk of being killed by a car if it's going faster is so much greater. But just to kind of put that graphically, 40 miles an hour is equivalent to falling out of a 6th floor window. Pretty unlikely you're going to survive. Whereas 20 miles an hour is a first floor, still pretty unpleasant, but much more likely to be survivable. People support it, as Mike said. This is recent data from the Department for Transport. So we know that communities are calling for this. There sometimes is a perception amongst local elected members that perhaps this is controversial. All the evidence shows that it isn't. When it goes in, it becomes more popular. And yes, there are sometimes some loud voices against lower speeds, but they are very much in the minority, and the silent majority supports it. And that's what Department for Transport data shows. Enforcement, just to touch on that again, though, they are absolutely enforceable, just like any other speed limit. And some police forces, particularly Avon and Somerset, the Met Police in London do have an active enforcement programme. Community speed watch is possible, so you can still do everything that was discussed earlier about community speed watch. But as I said, even with limited enforcement, the roads do become safer. But community initiatives and technology such as parish councils offering car window stickers, once you've said what the appropriate speed is, it legitimises that behaviour, and people can display the fact that they are willing to travel at that speed, and that will slow everybody down. But new car-based technologies are coming quite soon. So new model cars across the EU and the UK government has said they're going to do this from next year. Will have automatic speed limiters, so you'll get at least a warning, and possibly the engine will slow down when you try to exceed the speed limit. And all new cars from 2024 will have that technology. So the burden of enforcement on the police is going to decline in the very near future. So we can have much more confidence in setting the speed that we expect drivers to travel at. Costs, it's much more effective, much more cost effective than traffic calming. And actually, if you miss out the main roads, of course, in a settlement, then it costs you more, because every time you go off a main road into a side road, you need more signs. The photograph here is taken in Faversham in Kent, which is a town of 20,000 people. We did some work, as my consultancy did some work for that town, and the whole town went 20 just a year ago. This is the cabinet member for transport celebrating that fact, and it's been highly effective. But it's very cheap. Signs £300, a traffic regulation order for the whole town £4,000, and 20 is plenty estimated typically costs around £5 a head on average to implement a 20-mile-an-hour limit without any traffic calming. There are lots of highway authorities who do have Pro-20 MPH policies, and some of those have come on board quite recently, including a number of counties. I'll mention Oxfordshire shortly. Kent, through our work in Faversham, strengthened its 20-mile-an-hour policy, and in total, around 21 million people live in authorities with very clear pro-20-mile-an-hour policies. Just to give you a scale of what's going on in some places, London, all of the green roads in London are now 20 miles an hour. You can see the scale of what's going on there. It's absolutely enormous, including all of the trunk roads, the Transport for London road network, like Park Lane, inside the congestion charge zone, regardless of the fact that they're dual carriageways, they're all 20 miles an hour now. Bristol, all of the blue roads are 20 miles an hour in Bristol, and it's been calculated with academic studies that's saving on average around 4.5 fatalities, 170 casualties a year across the whole of Bristol. But I mentioned Wales, so with the task force that I chaired, the Welsh Parliament resolved to adopt a 20-mile-an-hour limit in urban areas unless an exception is justified, and that law change will happen in 2023. 8 pilot settlements, including some quite large towns like Abergavenny, are going 20 as we speak. In Scotland, some interesting work going on at the moment. 90 settlements in the Scottish borders have recently gone 20, including a number of small market towns like Montrose, Galashiels. And this shows you the latest data, how the speed has reduced, looking at the average speed before the change in speed limit. So you can see there that this trend that I talked about, the faster roads see the greatest reduction in speed. And I do know that there's been very little enforcement going on in these Scottish borders towns. So if you were to, and we saw that in the report of Councillor Williams, if you say that you're only going to implement 20-mile-an-hour limits where the speed is already below 24, then you miss all of those benefits. You miss out all of those roads. You may not get the speeds down to 20 simply by changing the speed limit, but you will see some very dramatic reductions in speed if you do tackle those faster roads. So that's really important. Scotland, though, is like Wales, is now planning to bring in a default 20-mile-an-hour limit for all built-up areas. So that's where Scotland is going. Looking a bit closer to home, so a fairly close authority to Staffordshire, Cheshire West and Chester, they began a rollout of 20 limit schemes in 2017. They had a 4-year programme. They identified 223 sites. They've reported recently. They're still going, but when at the time of the report, they implemented 125, £616,000. So pretty cheap, quite small schemes, but all sign-only schemes. And what they found, that led to a reduction of 43% in collisions and 14% of killed and seriously injured. And if you put a monetised benefit based on the value of each accident saved, that gives a benefit of £3.5 million for that expenditure of 616,000. So really quite significant return on investment. And this is just the third year schemes, the location of those third year schemes across Cheshire West and Chester. You can see that they're happening all over the county. Oxfordshire, so a county council, I believe it was Conservative controlled when this resolution was made. They resolved in December last year to change their policy. As you can see there, they previously, again, they had this cap on 24 miles an hour. They said this is perverse and sends the wrong message to drivers about the danger of speeding. If you limit 20 mile an hour, you don't put in 20-mile limits on faster roads. And so they now have resolved that they support the premise that 20 miles an hour is the optimum speed limit. And I know that they're working on a revised speed limit policy right now, again, working closely with 20's Plenty on that. So where are we in Staffordshire? Well, it was very helpful to get the report of Councillor Williams. So it appears that there is no current local speed limit policy. The policy seems to be no more than we follow government guidance. But following guidance, in my estimation, is not a policy. There's no guidance to communities seeking low speed limits. There's no programme, unlike Cheshire West and Chester, of 20-mile-an-hour limits. The county's only done 12 schemes in 8 years. And it's only willing to do 20-mile-an-hour limits on roads with existing low speeds, which seems rather pointless. It's said that the county has a good road safety record, but actually, if you look at the killed and seriously injured casualties, it's actually increasing. This is the last 10 years of data from the Department for Transport showing how the number of people killed or seriously injured on roads in Staffordshire is actually going up. That's for both all road users and pedestrians and cyclists. And if we compare that to Cheshire West and Chester, you can see the trend is very much going in the other direction. So obviously, don't wish to be over critical here, but I think there is more to do, in my estimation, in Staffordshire. There is a handy little calculator on the 20's Plenty website based on £5 a head, and just very simply estimate what if you were to treat 75% of the roads in Staffordshire, what would that cost? Well, it's clearly going to cost quite a lot of money. It's going to cost you perhaps £3.3 million, and we know that that can't all be done at once. But the benefits of those accident savings, again, £50 million, enormous return on investment, as we've seen from other schemes. So just to conclude, our ask of the committee, we feel there's a case here to clarify and review the County Council's policy, criteria and funding for 20-mile-an-hour limits, and really develop some principles and actions for limits in Staffordshire that we think reflect best practice and really help the county to catch up. And so firstly, what is the demand for 20-mile-an-hour limits across Staffordshire? We've been speaking to quite a few parish councils and we know that demand is out there. We think let's research the funding opportunities, perhaps from the Safer Roads Partnership, from the Capital Fund, from developers, provide some clear guidance on the website, council website for parish, town and district councils, so we know what has to be done. Revise the Staffordshire guidance on new housing so that housing has 20-mile-an-hour limits. Let's get developers putting some money into this. And really, as with Oxfordshire, adopt a Staffordshire Council resolution of general support for 20 limits because of the benefits that they create. So thank you very much for that. And obviously, very happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I start by saying thank you to both of you for presenting to us today. We don't very often, and I don't think we've had it before, where members of the public have asked to come to our scrutiny committee. So thank you very much, and I'm glad it happened whilst I was chairman. So we'll go straight into questions to Mr. Barr and Mr. Jones. Councillor Smith.
Chairman, can I thank you for an excellent report to start off with. You don't need to sell me, I'm already on your side, but whether we can persuade the county to go that way, I don't know. I think that we have an interesting situation in Staffordshire where we have a mix between urban areas where we may have dual carriageways going through the major part of an urban area, where it would be very, very difficult to put a 20-mile-an-hour limit on that. But when I take my division, where I've got 10 villages, all of them with rat-running problems, to see a 20-mile-an-hour limit placed on those would really be quite excellent. And I would be absolutely delighted if the county wanted to do a trial programme to do it in my area, and I'd be very happy to put that on record. It would be quite simple in putting speed limits onto defined areas, because each of our rural areas have a curtilage which is clearly defined, and so to place a speed limit on the village curtilage I think would be an excellent thing for us to be able to do. I'm not sure, Chairman, how we stand as far as neighbourhood plans are concerned, because we're currently looking at refreshing our neighbourhood plans, and as the chairman of my local neighbourhood plan committee, I would love to have seen something related to 20 mile an hour in villages. The other thing that I was just looking at is that the cost of putting individual speed limits onto areas is very, very considerable. And in what you've said to us in terms of costs, if we're looking at some defined areas of, let's say, just the villages in Staffordshire or defined villages in Staffordshire, that would be significantly cheaper, I imagine, than it would be if we tried to apply these speed limits locally. I mean, we do, of course, adjacent to schools, have 20 mile an hour limits at certain times of the day. I'm not confident that those are very effective, because people don't look at their watch when they decide what speed to go through a village at. So I'd be very interested to hear your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shall I come back?
Yeah, if you want to answer that one.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm pleased, very supportive. Yes, that's right. Well, on the neighbourhood plan, I've been involved in a few neighbourhood plans. Unfortunately, my understanding is that neighbourhood plans are associated with the land use planning process, and they're not allowed to have highways policies in them, which is, I know many communities would really like them to, but I think there's a bit of a problem there with the way the neighbourhood plans are set up. But clearly some expression of support, and it could be that the neighbourhood plan is a good forum for at least gauging the views of a community, even if the outcome for lower speeds is not expressed through the neighbourhood plan, but through working with the county on changing the speed limit. But yeah, to take your point, I think you're absolutely right. I think what we're learning from 20-mile-an-hour limits is that if they're really small, you're almost through them in a flash and you don't really notice them. Speed limits rely, because they're not relying on humps and bumps, they rely on people understanding what the speed limit is. And if it covers a bigger area, there's more chance that people actually understand it and recognise it, which is why places like the Scottish border towns and villages, Faversham, the work that's been done in Wales is really looking to a large part at the whole of settlements or villages. But of course, it's always open if you do have a dual carriageway. And I know in Wales, there's talk of generally excluding dual carriageways from the default 20. They are more difficult. People expect to drive faster. There's absolutely no reason why you can't exclude that. It obviously does make the costs a bit higher because you then need more signs as you turn off the dual carriageway into the rest of the town. But it can be done. So I think a pilot programme to me sounds an excellent idea, and in a way that's what we're doing in Kimver. We've embarked on this little pilot study with the parish council, and we're working with the county, and we've had some useful data recently from county officers, just to gauge the views of local people, what the costs would be, and then just look at the feasibility of that, and if that's something that could be done in partnership with the county as well as with the parish, then we would really appreciate that. And perhaps, other settlements there could be a little programme of similar studies elsewhere.
Councillor Hutton.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree that changing the driving habits of people is key to bringing down KSIs. However, I look at everything in looking at the costs and what the benefits are. Our highways is very strapped for cash. It's one of the departments that really struggles with a very small budget. And I looked at your typical costs. Carrying out a speed survey, just moving a SID costs about £500 from one pole to another. So it's how you can, carrying out a speed survey for £400, I'm not quite sure what that sort of speed survey is. Traffic regulation order, every time you want to put 20-mile-an-hour limit in, that's four grand to start with. And signs, every time we've had signs changed and put up, that I know of, it's cost more than £300. But the one thing about Staffordshire, which is quite interesting, is in the rural areas, there are plenty of parish councils. I live in a rural area. My county council has got 5 parish councils, and that's great. I'm a county councillor for an urban area, and I don't have any parish councils. I've got 14,000 people and no parish councils whatsoever. I have no community at all. So what do? Do I go to a sports club? Do I go to a church? No, there is nobody. They're not interested. So I can tell you that you won't get any interaction in urban areas if there's no parish council to represent the people. And a county councillor cannot look at this sort of thing for 14,000 people. It's not possible. So I think, I agree that it'd be wonderful to reduce KSIs through altering drivers' behaviours. But I'm not convinced, and this presentation has not convinced me, that a blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in urban areas, or whether there's a 30 limit in Staffordshire, is A, cost-effective or will in fact work. Thank you.
Very happy to respond to that. The costs, so just in terms of the cost, we put down automatic traffic counters all the time as a company, and that is a typical cost. So I can absolutely verify that. There are plenty of companies out there who will put down the pneumatic tubes and give you a week's worth of data for that kind of money. Having said that, we're no longer reliant on that. In Kimver, we've been able to obtain GPS data from the Ordnance Survey. It's called Master Map data. It's cost us £90, and we've got data for the whole of the village on a link-by-link basis that we've been able to put into a GIS system. So the data is out there. But in terms of the return on investment, I can absolutely confirm that the return is real. That compared to traffic calming, which costs 10 times the amount of engineering work, this is a much more cost-effective approach, and many authorities are demonstrating that, as I've shown in the slides. And I'm sure that authorities like Oxfordshire and Cheshire West, they would not be doing this work if they didn't believe that it was actually did have a beneficial effect. In terms of the engagement with a town of 14,000 people, I'm not sure which town you're referring to. Yes, of course, if you don't have a parish council, that doesn't give you that route. But there are plenty of ways that the county or even the district council could engage through community groups. I would have thought, the county is well used to carrying out consultations, and I wouldn't have thought it's beyond the wit of the county to be able to do that. So, Mike, I don't know if you've got any further thoughts to add. Oh, you're still on mute, Mike. Let me see if I can. No.
We'll move on to the next question. Councillor Hussain.
No worries.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the excellent presentation, actually, and sharing your expertise with us. Really grateful for it. Can I just quickly ask two questions, if I may? Would you agree that community involvement and drivers' personal responsibility is the key factor for any successful scheme? Whatever we do struggling with the enforcement side of it. It's everywhere. It's not practical as well to enforce everything. And secondly, in your presentation, you mentioned £3.1 million return is more than £50 million in terms. If feasible, is there any chance we can have in detail calculations of your assertions? Thank you.
Yeah. So the point about yeah, you're absolutely right about driver attitudes. This is a hearts and minds thing, and that's certainly the approach that's been taken in Wales. Actually, there was a point in response to the previous councillor. I meant to say, and I should have said, you use the term blanket 20. We're not calling for blanket 20. What we're calling for is a greater use of 20. It's not blanket. We know that there will be exceptions. It's even the same in Wales, where there's going to be a default 20. In other words, the presumption will be 20 instead of 30, but there'll still be plenty of 30-mile-an-hour roads. We're not talking about a blanket 20. We know it's not appropriate everywhere, and there will be exceptions to that. But in Wales and in other authorities, the public campaigning or the public promotion of 20 miles an hour goes hand in hand. But in a sense, you can't tell people, you can't encourage people to drive at 20 when the speed limit says they can drive at 30. 20 miles an hour is an important first step. You set what the right behaviour is, and then you publicise the right behaviour. You can't publicise 20 until you tell people that that's what it should be. So the two go hand in hand. And then, as I say, enforcement. If you get 30 miles an hour is not enforced. We know that. I did see some stats here that I think something like over 90% of the speed limit charges that go against drivers in Staffordshire are through cameras. There's actually very little police enforcement of any speed limits in Staffordshire. It's nearly all camera work. So this is not going to rely on enforcement. It's going to rely on behaviour change. And the starting point of behaviour change is to say what the right behaviour is, and that's what the 20 is about. And the 3.1 million, so it's a very rough cost. It's simply based on some work that 20 is Plenty has done nationally based on this £5 per head. What I think we would like to do, and we're planning to do in Kinver, is let's take a real town, work out how many signs it's going to be. We cost all of those, whether it's £300. I mean, if it's not £300 per sign, we've asked the county council if you can tell us what your term contractors charge. We'll use that cost. We'll work out a bespoke cost for that settlement. We can do a number of those as pilot studies, and then we can really understand what the cost might be. And yes, we know that £3.1 million, if that's the figure, can't be dreamt up overnight. So this is going to have to be phased in over a number of years. But it's important, we think, to make a programme, to start with a commitment, and then start to bring about the change, because I think what we feel is, as Staffordshire residents, that the county is kind of falling behind the curve on this. There's lots of authorities that are out there are taking a much more proactive attitude.
Thank you. I've got a couple of comments, if I may. I haven't got a specific question. Your data regarding London, I think London drivers can only dream of doing 20 miles an hour.
Sorry.
I'll carry on. We also need to remember that speed limits are advisories. They're not a target. Just because it says you can do 70 miles an hour doesn't mean to say you should. And I think drivers need to be better at driving to the flow of the traffic. Our European counterparts in Germany and France, Germany doesn't have speed limits. You drive to the flow of the traffic, and I've done a hell of a lot of driving around Europe to know that they have much less accidents than we do here with no speed limits. I've also received quite a lot of information and emails from people regarding this, and I have had an email from a councillor in Kinver that you've talked a lot about today. Kinver has had on average of 2.5 minor collisions over the last 10 years. The worst was at a school exit time when a child was hit on a zebra crossing under the view of parents and a lollipop lady. Whilst they do not oppose a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, they do not believe that lowering the whole village limit as suggested would improve those figures and potentially could increase them. I've got a report from a councillor in Brighton. They spent £850,000 on a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit scheme, and now they want to get rid of the scheme because it's caused more accidents in 12 out of 14 of their wards. However, they've spent that money and now they can't remove it. So they're stuck with it. And whilst I've taken on everything that you've said today, I do believe we can get better at doing the things that you said at the end of your presentation. Establish the demand, do the research, provide a little bit more guidance on how to do that on the website. Look at new housing developments. We have a housing development in Tamworth that is home zone and it's 20 miles an hour or less because of the amount of children. So those things are already in place. And I just think across the county, we need to remember that I live in a very urban area. I'm in a town. So 20 is plenty would not work. The traffic flow is we need to remember that roads need to flow, traffic needs to flow, and I think that 20 is plenty on some of our roads just won't work. We need to remember that every situation is different and should be decided locally and on its own merit. And I've got, once we've heard the Cabinet members' response back, I have a recommendation that I hope this committee will take forward.
Could I just come back on some of those points, please?
Yes, carry on.
Thank you. I'm not aware of the data in Brighton. All the research that we've done, and we researched 20 mile an hour extensively in our work for the Welsh Government, shows that consistently lower speed limits lead to lower casualties. There's absolutely no evidence. The councillor from Kinver said that lower speed limits could lead to increased casualties. There is absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever. You mentioned the suggestion that 20 mile an hour leads to reduced road capacity. Again, there's no evidence of that at all. What 20 miles an hour doesn't lead to longer journey times in urban areas because for the most part, your journey time in urban areas is dictated by the delay at junctions. If you travel at 30 between junctions, all that really happens is you get to the queue faster. What 20 miles an hour does is cap the free flow speed between junctions to, or it doesn't cap it, but it reduces the free flow speed. But in terms of journey times and overall speeds, it makes very little difference. And that's, again, something that has been researched extensively. The suggestion that there's no speed limits in other countries, I find that very surprising. Spain has recently decided to bring in, again, not a blanket 20 miles an hour, but a default 30 kilometers an hour, which is broadly the equivalent in urban areas in Spain. We know that there's an awful lot of 30-kilometer roads in other European countries on the continent. So the suggestion that Staffordshire is somehow unique and won't see the benefits that other places, both in the UK, whether it's small villages like in Scotland or towns and cities like London and Bristol, the Staffordshire won't see similar benefits in its towns and villages. There's absolutely no evidence of that at all. And I think what we need to do is simply try it. You know, at the moment, we know that the county's done very little on this. What's the harm in establishing a pilot programme in partnership with some communities and seeing what happens? That's what Kent has done. That's what Oxfordshire is likely to do, and actually, you know, begin to try this out. Thank you.
If I can just come back, I have to disagree with you when you say that reducing speed limits doesn't cause a problem with traffic flow. I drive here along the M6. I get off the M6 toll and it's 50 miles an hour. What happens? Everybody's bumper to bumper because you've gone from 70 down to 50. And it does cause incidents with traffic flow. It does cause accidents when people are all trying to slow. You can shake your head as much as you like, Phil. Mr. Jones, sorry. If you can just let me finish. If you can just let me finish. It does cause problems with traffic flow. If you're going from 70 and some drivers are doing more than 70, my car restricts me to the speed limit. I have a new car. When you go from 70 down to 50, that traffic is all going to bunch up until you get to the next junction and it clears. I saw it firsthand this morning. I have it on my dash cam if you would like to see it. So, you know, that is an unfair thing for you to say when you say it doesn't cause traffic flow, because it does, because everybody slows down at the same time and it causes traffic congestion.
Now, the point I was making was urban areas. You were saying on a motorway. In urban areas, I specifically made the point in urban areas at 30 miles an hour, that where you're going between traffic lights and roundabouts and all the rest of it and all the queues that you get in an urban area, that's where it doesn't make any difference. I wasn't making a point about motorways at all. So in urban areas, there is no evidence that it causes congestion or collisions or whatever. All the evidence is that this is beneficial.
Councillor Flunder.
Thank you, Chair. Just first of all, I'd like to say thank you. Obviously, it's a great presentation. It links very much neatly into the road safety partnership thing, which we've just heard. And I do think that most of the councillors within the County Council are very concerned about road speed and road safety, as I explained on the previous item. My issues around 20 is plenty as a sort of the county-wide approach is really down to the way that we can enforce it. In certain areas there are certainly community speed watch and community areas that will have that and therefore will be able to monitor what's going on, and that's one of the issues that I've got around an area which I've reduced to 30 miles an hour at the moment, and we've got to prove that the expenditure was worthwhile to reduce the road from 40 to 30 miles an hour, and we're going to have to rely on the community to provide some of the data to make sure that that enforcement, you know, or rather that the average speed is actually reduced by that type of safety project. I do like the links that you are relating to at the moment, certainly in relation to the infrastructure plans that both county and district councils have within Staffordshire. to provide better walking and cycling facilities, etc., etc. I do think that the 20 is plenty in some areas, particularly in the urban locations, does come into play, and I think that's something that we probably will have to look at potentially in the future as we try and develop and spend. I think we're spending £31 million on a project at the moment in 6 of the main urban areas within the county. So I think that the 20 is plenty concept might fit into there, and that might be one of the projects we could maybe look at in tied up with that. I don't know, but that's something that I'll rely on the cabinet member to maybe look at. My main question to you at the moment, because I'm looking at 2 congested areas and looking at safety around schools, which is something I've been doing now for 5 years. My concern about this is that does 20 is plenty add or subtract from, if you like, behaviour and control measures that we might be able to put into place with the approval of local residents? That might be one aspect. The aspect that I'm concerned about at the moment is, will the traffic users and car users respect or at least be affected by the idea that the limit is reduced, bearing in mind that there's very heavy congestion around these areas at the moment, and the biggest issue, as the Chair's already alluded to, is in fact trying to keep the traffic flowing would be probably a slightly safer mechanism to improve what's going on, because of people parking in and around very inaccessible roads and other areas, and the residents and others are being very badly affected by all this. So that's a question directly to yourselves in here. One good bit of news for you, I don't want to try and lay too much down on this, is that several years ago we did take this on. We did have a look at several projects around, one of which was along the A522 in Checkley for a primary school there. And I must say that the 20 is plenty, which is a temporary measure outside the school for the school drop-off and pick-up times, I can report has worked extremely well along that road, which was a 40-mile-an-hour road beforehand. And I do say that I would say 90% of the drivers actually do take a positive response to that 20 is plenty is there. So I hope I've provided some more of a balanced approach there, but I do think the idea of using it across the whole county as one answer to everything, I do think that potentially that's something that we need to work on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Joel, just to, again, the point we're not seeking, just be absolutely clear what we're asking for here. We're not asking for this across the whole county. We're not asking for blanket 20 miles an hour at all. We're simply asking for a more positive attitude. There seems to be at the moment not much recognition that 20-mile-an-hour limits have a part to play. We know that the county's done very few of them. It sounds as though they've been done in response to kind of local campaigns around schools, that kind of thing. But as a exception rather than something like Cheshire West and Chester that has a clear policy, they've done a very careful study. They looked at where the priority sites should be, and they've allocated some funding, and they've established a programme. And we know, but that's a long way from blanket across the whole county by all means. I'm really pleased that he's been successful at that score. That's great. What I would say, though, is generally what we found is that small area schemes like around schools, they do have a benefit locally and for that moment in time, but they're not as effective as 20-mile-an-hour limits that cover larger areas, because accidents happen at all times of day and night. They don't just happen at school drop-off times. As you said, around school drop-off times, you've got congestion. So actually the problem then is not so much about speed, it's about, although you might have someone driving too quickly into that congested area, but the problem is about people parking badly and hiding children who are crossing the road and that kind of thing. The other point about 20 miles an hour, it's not, as I said in the presentation, it's not all about road safety. There's evidence to show that as you do bring speeds down, and we know that there is a need to get more people walking and cycling because it's good for us, it's good for emissions and all the rest of it. And one of the things that does, as I put into one of the early slides, what the government recognises is that 20-mile-an-hour limits have a part to play in encouraging more people to walk and cycle. If we can get more people to walk and cycle, that will include more children walking and cycling to school, whether it's with their parents or on their own, and that will reduce the congestion around school gates. So all of this is pointing in the right direction. It's not just about collisions, it's not just about casualties, it's not about capacity by any means. It's about just generally changing the way in which our urban roads are used to favour more beneficial more benign, safer, healthier forms of transport. That is a lot of what this is about, and we just know that's generally a good thing. And it seems at the moment that there's a kind of tool in the toolkit here that we've got, and we're not saying it should be applied everywhere, but it's a tool that Staffordshire is not proactively using, and we just think it should develop a programme to do that.
If there are no further questions, I'll bring in Councillor David Williams for his response.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I thank you for the presentation as well. There are lots of things with regards to the 20 is plenty and 20 miles an hour around the county. One of the things I'd like to do is notify the committee of what we're trying to do here today. So we're asking you to recognise that Staffordshire's programme of highway improvements is informed by legislation, national and local strategy, best practice and community aspiration. That means when communities want things, we look to support those, and that's what you as local members do. The committee members are also invited to consider the highways improvements, and through working with the Safer Roads Partnership, the delivery of road safety education, training and enforcement activities have together contributed to Staffordshire having one of the safest highway networks in the country. And it's also requested that the Scrutiny Committee recognises and supports the need for ongoing review of the 20 mph speed limit zones, and they're just one of a range of measures, tools has been said, that can be used by the Council to improve road safety and create an environment that supports sustainable travel modes and healthier lifestyles. A lot of my officers are already working to do that. We have the LC WHIP, we're putting in for 3 schemes at the moment. We've applied for another 3 schemes at the moment, as we speak, to do just that. And those are being worked on and being consulted on. And one of the things that the group don't seem to understand is consultations are extremely expensive, time-consuming, and generally not that very well populated. We don't get that much back from our communities when we regards to this. And if we were to do, as they say, enforce this in their urban areas, we've got a lot of questions going on about our rural areas. This is a very rural county, and these 20 mph zones don't always work in that type of area. Rat runs, as Councillor Smith has said, are one of the perfect examples where actually the problem isn't the fact of the 30 mph zone, it's the people not taking any notice of the 30 mph zone. And one of the things that has been muted in here is who is going to take notice of a 20 mph zone where the police have already said they will not enforce 20 miles an hour. The point of the 20 mph signs is a recognition of those issues around schools especially. And that is why it is highlighted in those areas, so that people will slow down when they're going past schools for the safety of the children. And that means that we are already educating our drivers to say, there's a greater risk here, please think about it. And as we all know, people out there drive how they drive. Vehicles these days are not all electric, so they're not all that efficient at certain speeds, but also they are quicker. They seem to be quicker than the older cars do, definitely. And these are the sort of things that we're trying to ensure we are working with our communities and with our residents and with the people who use our highways to say, here is a risk, please think about it, please slow down. When we're talking about cameras and the fixed cameras, the Staffordshire Safer Roads Partnership is already working to try and effectively utilise the fixed cameras that we have. Never mind the mobile cameras. The fixed camera schemes are really, really expensive. They don't bring in huge amounts of profit, as people might think, because of the cost of the actual film and so forth, and the maintenance, and the management, and the ongoing works that have to go on with them. So the actual Safer Roads Partnership at the moment is trying to look at digital cameras and getting around the legal frameworks and making sure that these digital cameras will be able to be used in the future so that people would not be able to say that these the photos or the films have been able to be digitally altered. And these are legal frameworks that are going to cost a lot of money, take a lot of time for us to be able to enforce and get in. I absolutely think the £616,000 input from the County Council, I think it was Bristol or Essex, is one thing, but the £3.5 million benefit, first of all, to even think about thinking of that from a County Council point of view, we'll put some money in and we'll get a load of money out instead of road safety, is not the right way. And this benefit is definitely indirect. We get none of that back. So we would be putting the money in, we would be getting none of the money out. The bus services would also be affected. I think we have to remember that all bus services who are struggling at the moment, and we're working with them to create a BSIP and are going forward with a plan, that would alter their timetables, that would alter things that go on there, and that is a cost to private companies. That is not encouraging people to go onto them if they're going to be on these buses for longer. And remembering that if they've got to be slower, they will be putting out, at present time, they will be putting out more pollution from their vehicles than they would do when they're going at their nominal speeds. It's a very nice looking report, and I have to say, it is, unfortunately, I feel it's a bit flawed. The signs around, when we're talking about signs and fitting signs, is around £2,000. It's not just the actual fitting, it's the insurance, it's the legal frameworks, it's the health and safety that goes with that. So even if we were looking at it from a small village with 4 entrances in, so if you want to put a traffic order in, yes, it's about £4,000, but now you've got £2,000 per set of signs to put on. Those also have to be monitored for ongoing maintenance. And remembering also, there is no enforcement. There is no police are going to do that. In March of 2021, the Select Committee received a request for scrutiny of the County Council's policy regarding the use of 20-mile-an-hour limits. And the requester suggested that 20-mile-an-hour limits should be normalised for built-up areas and villages, and called for the provision of a funding plan. Members, you all know that my budget this year alone was cut by £8.7 million. Government doesn't give me any forward plan of how much I'm going to get, and therefore to start putting on a brand new, unsubstantiated plan would cost money to put together, and at this present moment in time, I don't think I have had any such representations from the communities or from members to say that we should be doing that. This report also provides the background information on the issues raised by the requester and provides the recommendations on the way forward. So they want a further mandate from the Department of Transport in 2007 that local authorities were required to review the setting of speed limits on all A and B roads. The Cabinet agreed a speed limit policy, which we do have, that reflected the national guidance at that time. And in addition to this, in 2010, the Cabinet approved a phased introduction of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits outside schools. That has been successful. We are not seeing any issues of children being hit out around schools, and that is the point. A lot of members here like speed limits to be changed on lots and lots of roads. And when they go and speak to their schemes, you will be told, will you not, actually it needs to change at this point because of the physical limitations, the physical design, what is there on that site. The point of the speed limit changes is to highlight there is a risk forward, as well as all the normal things that go with road safety that you get out of your highway code, how much white paint there is on the roads. The more white paint, the more dangers there are. The point of us changing speed limits in certain areas is to actually highlight where the risks are. And generally, and I'm going to say generally, most drivers comply with this. We are always going to get drivers who don't. And unfortunately, those are the drivers that do get mandatory fixed penalties notices. They're the ones who have to go to their courses. They're the ones who get the tickets and the points on their licence. The For national guidance on 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, the guidance in setting up local speed limits states that 20-mile-an-hour speed limits or zones can be introduced on major streets where there are or could be significant numbers of journeys on foot, where pedal cycle movements are an important consideration and outweighs the disadvantage of longer journey times for most motorised traffic. We don't have that in Staffordshire. We are a very rural area. People don't generally want to travel many miles on bicycles to and from work. And even with the fact that we've got some cycleways and we've put in some money into cycleways through the LC WHIP, even if we doubled our amount of cyclists, that would mean 4% of our population would then be using cycling. So members, unfortunately, I recommend that the introduction of an additional 20-mile-an-hour limit zone within local neighbourhoods should continue as identified in the Council Strategic Programme of Work and as local community priorities established through the members' Divisional Highways Programme, that would then be considered. I've spoken to the group personally on a one-to-one with Councillor Wilson, who is supportive in ensuring that the group was heard. And as we said to them, if communities, if members have issues, wish to look at having these introduced, they could do so through their DHP in working with their parishes, with their boroughs, and they would then come to us to talk about it. But the funding at this present moment in time would have to be sought elsewhere, because unfortunately at this moment in time we have no areas that have been highlighted from the assessments that we've done that need to be 20 miles an hour at present, apart from the ones we've put around schools as advisories, and therefore we're happy to work with parishes and members should they wish to do that, but this is a community issue and they would have to come to us as an executive. Got anything else, Mary? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David Williams, for that extensive response, and I've noted your recommendation, and if members will allow myself as chairman, I'd just like to add a paragraph onto the bottom of that, which Councillor Williams has already alluded to, and that is I would like to see residents engage with their county councillors on any issues to do with speeding or traffic calming, and resolve this at a local level for the benefit of their communities that it affects. Anybody, any problems with that being added to the first recommendation?
Chairman, only that we aren't already doing that. I will have a complete traffic study done in my area by October. I have all the facilities in my area to look at implementing something, but it is very, very difficult to do. I'm happy to make DHP money available, but I've just done one scheme which has cost me £2,000, and that makes it very difficult. I would like to see an experimental area done which wouldn't cost a lot of money, and it could be done out of DHP funding, and then we would have something to work on. It doesn't have to be funded immediately. It's something that we can deal with progressively. And that's why I feel I understand the situation, but I'm disappointed. Thank you, Chairman.
I think we all are to a degree. We all know how much these things cost, and when you get given a few £1,000s, it doesn't go very far when you're trying to put up 20-mile-an-hour signs or whatever signs. The other thing I was going to say is that on the presentation we had 5 bullet points of number 1, establish demand, number 2, research, number 3, provide guidance on our county council website of how about going about that, look at new housing developments and 20-mile-an-hour zones, and I forgot what the 5th one was, adopt something, but we can look at that afterwards. I'd like to see those. I mean, obviously establish the demand and the research is going to be done by us as members working within our local communities. I do think we could put a little bit of guidance, if it's not already on the County Council website, of how to do that and how to go about it. New housing comes under what Councillor Smith said right at the start about planning applications, and whatever the 5th one was, I can't remember now.
The only other thing I was thinking of is also maybe having a review of the whole process
Yeah.
in a couple of years' time for come back under the Safer Roads Partnership with the 20 is Plenty as part of that. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd got that written down, so perhaps to come back, maybe not in 2 years, but maybe in 12 months' time, you'll probably have a new committee and a new chairman all over again. But we'll work with that. So if everyone's happy, all those in favour? Thank you. And thank you to Mr Jones and Mr Barr for your presentation this morning. It's been lovely to have some people in to engage with us, and we'll look at everything going forward that you've given us today. Thank you.
If I could just say very briefly, thank you for the resolution, and if members are going to work with their communities on that establishment of demand, we would be very happy to work with you on that. Obviously, people are nationally on 20 is Plenty have got a lot of experience of doing that, so we'd be delighted to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're both free to turn off now, or you can listen in, whatever you choose. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item 7, National Bus Strategy, Bus Service Improvement Plan Development. Oh, David, Councillor Williams, it's over to you again.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, with the National Bus Strategy, I'm going to, I actually need to nip out the back, so I'm going to hand straight over to Louise, if that's all right, just to give you an overview of what we're doing, and I will be back to help out.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Would you like me to carry on? Thank you. So earlier on this year, DfT published its National Bus Strategy, announcing £3 billion worth of funding for local authorities and operators to work towards enhancing the local bus service network. As part of that National Bus Strategy, they asked local authorities to declare their intent to work towards producing what's called a Bus Service Improvement Plan, or a BSIP within the report. And they asked us to declare that intent by the 30th of June. So a paper was taken to full council on the 16th of June, at which point it was confirmed that Staffordshire intended to work towards producing a bus service improvement plan with all of our operators in Staffordshire, with a view to then developing an enhanced partnership. The timeline has been extremely tight for local authorities and operators up and down the country. And where we are now is we've formed a group of all Staffordshire operators to meet and engage to try and understand what their aspirations are for this strategy. And their views are ultimately extremely important, because in Staffordshire, 95% of our local bus network is operated on a commercial basis. So while central government have made £3 billion of funding available across the term of Parliament, it's absolutely critical that we work with our bus operators in Staffordshire to ensure that the commercial viability remains and increases, especially after what they've all gone through during the last 18 months and the pandemic. We're also undertaking a public engagement exercise. I think we've had around 1,200 responses so far, and that engagement closes tomorrow. So unfortunately, I haven't got any first-hand feedback from the bus operators who meet today and the public engagement exercise, because it doesn't close till tomorrow, but that information and engagement with both those areas will help inform our future BSIP document. The timeline for producing the BSIP is very tight. We have to have that document submitted with DfT by the 31st of October. That's a hard stop date, there's no negotiation there. And that document has to provide a high-level overview of what Staffordshire intends to do in the coming years to enhance the local public bus network. And if I can refer you to point 19, because I think for the purpose of the committee today, it's important to just consider some of the key elements that could form part of the BSIP, which include multi-operator ticketing, bus priority, whole route audits, which would, for example, take a very local approach, so where we know there's a specific issue. So, for example, outside the hospital in Burton. Look at high-quality bus stop infrastructure to make the entire experience of using the bus network of a better quality, and hopefully grow patronage. To improve the bus network, bearing in mind that, as I said earlier, 95% of our network is already operating on a commercial basis. Grow patronage, that is absolutely key. So our engagement exercise is reaching out to bus users and non-bus users, because it's absolutely important to help with our tackling of our climate change agenda, that we start to try and see a modal shift away from the car onto greater use of public transport, including the local bus network. Improved customer satisfaction. Emissions standards will be critical, and again that links to air quality improvements and to our climate change agenda, and marketing and promotion and encouragement of people using the local bus service. And I think point 20 in the report just makes the comment that our current local supported budget, network budget, is only £1.2 million. So we only spend a very, very small sum of money supporting our local bus network at the moment. And whilst £3 billion has been committed by central government, in the longer term we have to be careful that that investment goes into areas that will remain commercially viable and sustainable in the longer run. And that was perfect timing, Councillor Williams. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. Yeah, I think the whole point about what we're trying to achieve with this is that, first of all, the government didn't give us a lot of time to apply. If we didn't apply to do it, we weren't then going to be able to apply for any funding. And what we wanted to ensure was that we are supporting our bus services without looking at introducing schemes that haven't got longevity, that will be removed, and looking at what services that we can offer for our communities, which obviously, as Louise said, when we were talking of enhancing the experience, making the bus stops better, maybe informative, maybe electronic, maybe even having air quality monitoring and treatment in them. These are sort of things that we're looking at. But what we aren't doing is telling the bus services how to run buses. We don't run them. What we are doing is saying to them, we're looking for you to innovate. How can you look forward to ensure that your service for our residents continues? And that's what we're trying to promote with this. So, yeah, I'm more than welcome members' comments.
Thank you, Councillor David Williams. Thank you, Louise. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair. I recently had a meeting with the Managing Director of First Bus Yorkshire and Midlands over a matter in my division, and we were talking generally, and I brought up some comments that residents had mentioned to me, and one was about timetables. And the Managing Director, Nigel Eglinton, I think, said that actually the County Council puts up the timetables. The bus companies aren't allowed to put timetables up, which I found surprising, because if they're operating the service, surely they should be putting the timetable up. So if we are going to enhance bus shelters or bus stops, I think that making the bus companies keep an up-to-date schedule at those bus stops would be enormously helpful in encouraging people to use buses, particularly, as it's been mentioned so many times today, we are mostly a rural area. So bus might come along only once every hour. So people need to know when to be there. And I'm also well aware that, as Ms. Sheridan said, no bus company is going to put on a route that is not viable. So it's a matter of, and he said to me, if people don't use the buses, then there will be no bus service. So it's about how do we encourage, as Ms. Clayton said, how do we encourage people to use buses? That must be the key to this. So I think I absolutely welcome us looking at how we make bus stops more attractive, better, with good information. And perhaps even, if we are going to go digital, we could even have general council information actually in bus stops, a scrolling screen of big decisions or how to go about things. But that's all I can add in. But it was very interesting listening to the problems of a bus company. So, thank you.
Councillor Flunder.
Thank you, Chair. After experiencing my own issues with regard to bus services within Staffordshire, namely on behalf of my own children, the bus services to get children to school at the moment is somewhat questionable at the moment. I realise we can't necessarily dictate to the bus companies how to operate their buses, but obviously if the children can't get to schools at the right time, my daughter's arriving at the moment, and take this, I suppose, personal interest on this one, she's arriving later than she needs to because the bus that she previously got is no longer available. So it does seem rather strange that there's no linkage at the moment, and I don't know whether there should be a linkage between obviously what we're doing in schools as part of a strategy on that relationship and what we're doing with buses, etc., to make it more viable in the long term, to try and reduce, and this goes back to a previous lot we've had today, congestion around schools. So I think they are linked indirectly in just that one particular area, but I would like to find out whether or not we can do more to encourage bus operators to be able to provide decent services to the schools and education establishments around the county. I think that's an important item to take forward. And then the other one, and I'm speaking potentially on behalf of two other councillors in here in terms of the Staffordshire Moorlands, what bus services, I think, would be the phrase that we would say to you. We're in a rural area and there's virtually very limited bus services in and around all the hundreds of villages, but not far off, I wouldn't have thought. And what we can do necessarily within that district to be able to improve that, and how we can maybe try and put something together, both with the county council, the bus operators and everything else, to try and improve that and make that financially viable in some way. And that's part back to the green agenda, which is another thing that the county is also looking at. So I do think that there's links of this particular policy into other areas that the county council is very concerned about, and I do think and hope that the strategic plan will take those elements forward as well. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose the most important thing we start looking at bus services is consultation with the people who either use them or would use them if the service was there. I'm slightly concerned, well, more than slightly concerned, about the passenger engagement questionnaire that we've had. On Wednesday morning, I was at the coffee club in one of my villages. Out of all the people that were there, 23 of them don't have access to the internet. And so I anticipated that and printed off some hard copies of the questionnaire, and I have those here for you today, which I'll give to you. But the problem we have in terms of the timing that we've got, to have the closing date tomorrow, parish councils are something that we need to be involved with. I had a parish council last night, which was my first one that I was able to present this to. I had 2 parish councils on Tuesday night, and I have 1 parish council next week, which will be too late to respond to anything at all. So I would earnestly ask, I know we're under tremendous pressure to do things here, but I would earnestly recommend that we extend the closing date for the responses to come back again. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to get a proper response back again from the community. And so I would earnestly ask for the possibility that we might, even if it was only by a week, extend that time. You know, my people in one village will not get an opportunity to respond, and they have no buses at all and want one, because they don't have a parish council meeting until next Tuesday, which is after the closing date. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Williams, are you able to respond to Councillor Smith?
I will, with the able help of Louise and certain things. With the bus stops, I think you're quite right. I have to remind people, though, that the bus companies don't own the bus stops, well, most of them. Most of them are either owned by, some are owned by us, boroughs and parishes. So actually for the allowance of putting bus timetables in, I was never informed that they couldn't do that. In fact, most parishes that I know usually are asking them to update them and keep them updated. So if you can let us know that, we can check that one out. When it comes to schools and so forth, there is a disconnect. And to looking at it from a longevity and a financial point of view, is that's going to be up to the bus companies. We can support them to look at that, but obviously, again, when we're talking about viability of services, like when you say, what bus service? If the service isn't viable, then that's the problem. We have just introduced one up in the Moorlands, actually, a smaller one, haven't we? So we are looking at certain things and types of vehicles. What we're looking at these companies to do is look at what they're providing and how they provide it. So not just having to have a bus, maybe the types of vehicles that they're using, and looking forward, because obviously these are companies that presumably people will want to carry on. Yeah, Louise, have you got any extreme? Oh, and with the timing, unfortunately, I've got to say that this is a government push. With the times that they gave us to initially apply for the bid to go for a BSIP and then actually put it on is very, very tight. So these are timings, unfortunately, they've been set by government, and that this is the only way we can get these things through with the proper amount of scrutiny like now to do it. Louise?
Can I just clarify that? My understanding from this is that the deadline for the report to be completed is the 31st of October. Surely there is a week of slack within the time frame to be able to let the community contribute to what's going on. After all, they're the people who use the buses.
Louise, did you want to answer that one?
Thank you, Chair. I do take on board that the engagement exercise has only been open for 4 or 5 weeks, and it's not perhaps as long as we would have liked. It's not a formal consultation, it's an engagement at this stage, simply because they're to inform the BSIP document, which will provide a high-level overview. The enhanced partnership, which won't be set up until March of next year, is when the real detailed work gets underway and when local engagement and consultation will absolutely be needed. So I'll have to revert back to Councillor Williams. Any delay or extension may cause an issue with us meeting the deadline to take a report to Cabinet in October in order to then get that document ready for the end of October, but I'm happy to take views on that. Just with regards to the timetable matter, I do know Nigel Eggleton. It's quite interesting because we've actually worked very closely with First, and they actually do the installation of timetables in cases on our behalf in some areas. The responsibility is split between operators and the County Council. We have an obligation to provide timetables on routes that are served by the buses that we subsidise. So about 4% of the network, 96% of the network, the operators manage commercially, and therefore they're responsible for the timetable cases. However, it's an inconsistent approach depending on the operator and depending on the area. So the BSIP and the Enhanced Partnership provides us with an excellent opportunity to ask for funding to provide a better level of information and service and make it more standardised. We do have real-time information at certain locations. That's something we'll be looking to expand on, and again, that's where we could push out messages about county council work as well as timetable information. I think the school point's been picked up on, and I suppose it's just worth flagging there are severe shortages of drivers in the industry at the moment, so we are experiencing and have experienced in the last 2 weeks issues with local services not operating on a commercial basis. And we're starting to feel the pinch in our homeschool network right now because there's a shortage of drivers as people leave to go and become HGV drivers. So we're actually seeing services being pulled with absolutely no notice. So I can only apologise for that. It's something that we're working through as we speak as a team. Staffordshire Moorlands have a new service about to start. We had to delay the start, unfortunately, from the start of September due to procurement issues, but as of the middle of October, a demand responsive service will start. There will be 3 minibuses serving quite a large area of the Staffordshire Moorlands, and it will be interconnecting with all local bus services, so we'll be able to provide more connectivity with rural villages and link into bus services on those key arterial routes. And the purpose is twofold: to provide access to residents and communities, and also to bring tourists into the area. And that's in partnership with Derbyshire, the Peak District, and a number of other organisations. And the final point was around the public engagement. So whilst the survey is due to close tomorrow, and we have plans to analyse that data next week, I'll take thoughts from the floor. Thank you, Chair.
The only thing I could suggest for Councillor Smith is please do liaise, and if you could get that information to us as soon as the meeting's on, we'll see if we can get it in. But as I say, a lot of the problem is this is really being forced through at a very, very tight schedule from government to get everything in, and obviously with our policies and procedures to make sure that we follow those properly, so that when reports come to Cabinet they are done properly. We are on a very tight schedule, and there's very little room for any stretch. So if we can, we will incorporate it if possible.
Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'll premise my remarks by saying I'm fully supportive of the initiatives and the things that you've got in mind. I think it's the right way forward. I'd just like to take a step back and look at it from a user's point of view, or former bus user's point of view, if you like. For example, I've got Mrs. Peake and Mrs. Cope that live in my patch, both widowed ladies in the late 80s, ferociously independent, who had the double whammy of, first of all, being told that the subsidy was being removed from their bus route, so it was going to stop. And then the realisation that they would still be paying council tax to subsidise other people's bus routes. And they have no immediate family around them, so they would have to rely on neighbours and, as they perceive it, charity, rather than having their own independence. Then to see on the news that the government is investing £3 billion into buses, to be delighted thinking that maybe, just maybe, this is going to come back, only to find out that actually the money is going to be spent on posh, fancy digital screens and improving bus stops for other people around the county, rather than reintroducing services that are needed desperately in the rural communities. I understand all the logic behind it, the reason. It's just, how do we justify that to these individuals out there who are going to be looking to us, thinking that this is going to be a step forward for them, and only to find out it might be some fancy air monitoring equipment down to the south of the county or wherever it may be. And it's a very hard sell for us as rural councillors to try and justify that. So it's just to try and see it from their point of view and how we justify it and manage that perception and apparent disparity of service. Thank you.
Absolutely, I can see it from that point of view, but I think what I have ensured that the officers have been made aware of is that we're never having or applying for the BSIP for us to then start subsidising routes again. I mean, I understand that it was £13 plus per person per subsidies that were going on at certain times, and that's just financially unsustainable. So what I didn't want to do was introduce such schemes that then, when this funding does stop from the government, which it will do, that then we have to take them away again. What we are looking to do, and what we're working with our bus companies, is asking them what possibilities are there to incorporate enablement of your residents to be able to get a bus. So are there days that they will be able to alter their service and their route to be able to pick them up? Are there things that are out there that would enable them, such as different types of vehicle, to do just that? So this is the point of the BSIP is for, really, the way that we are working it is for bus companies to be innovative, to look at what they do and how they will be able to connect with their communities, but at the same time ensure that there is a longevity, and these are not small, short, sharp things that then end in the future. And that's what we're trying to do. So it's as well as that as, like you say, when we're looking at bus stops and making them a bit more fancy for certain things. They've done it with the trains, and people actually do seem to work like that. As Cannock train station, perfect example, Hensford. People are loving the fact that they can go there. There's a screen that tells them when the next train's coming. It even talks to them from bus. I'm not saying that that's going to happen on every bus stop, but actually having a bus stop that is enclosed or has actually got some protection from the elements, looking at what we can do to help with air quality in certain areas because of the topography. These are certain things that are innovations that we would like to look to introduce, and obviously get some money out of the government to do that. But as you're aware, I had nearly £10 million taken out of my budget, and lo and behold, it was put into buses and cycling. So what we're trying to do is ensure that the people who do use our buses are going to be using them in the right ways, and they have that longevity, so that they can keep that service going. I have every sympathy, and that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to address that, but in the right way, not in the short, sharp way.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You mentioned about 95% of the bus operator from the private companies. And can I just ask you, is there any report or study available where we can see that we are getting the actual, good value for money, especially any comparative study in relation to other counties in the county? And at the same token, we must not forget those bus drivers who help us, keep our county moving as well. As big thank you to them as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think there are the statistics out there to say that the ones that we do subsidise, the very small amount that we now subsidise, are there and being used. Otherwise, that's, if the subsidies were going up in per journey, they wouldn't be. Because I think it was said in the last council meeting, use it or lose it, and that is a real case, unfortunately, when it comes to buses. But absolutely as well, that we have got a national, apparently, a national and local shortage of bus drivers, and that remembering that these people have worked throughout the COVID in most cases, and are in difficult positions. So yes, my thanks has always gone out to them for looking after people. Some actually go above and beyond, as we know, to help people out. So absolutely, Councillor Hussain, thank you.
If there are no further questions, another really good report, which we've well scrutinised. There are 3 recommendations on this one. That we note the aims of the National Bus Strategy and observe that the Council has committed to an enhanced partnership. Committee members comment on the emerging themes which are likely to be the focus of the Council's bus service improvement plan, and committee members consider where there are elements that are missing. I think you've all inputted those as we've gone through the report today. So if we're all happy, all those in favour? Thank you very much, and thank you to David and his team that have been with us all morning. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the work programme. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairman. Basically, as set out in the report, but I need to highlight a couple of additional matters that have arisen since the report was published. You'd actually suggested an additional item for the rearranged meeting on Monday the 29th of November, which is Local Industrial Strategy Strategic Infrastructure Plan. I've had an indication from officers that probably that wouldn't be the best time to scrutinise the issue. Apparently they're working on an updated strategy at this time, which apparently is going to be available in early next year. So, I mean, obviously it's up to you, Chairman, but I wouldn't have said that was an ideal time to take that matter forward.
Yeah, we'll shelve that until it's properly ready for us then. Is there something else that we've got for the can I just make sure members are aware that the Thursday the 14th of November is changed, Thursday the 11th of November even has changed. It's now Monday the 29th of November. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I've been called for jury service on the 1st of November, so I'm probably not going to be available for 2 weeks. Was there anything else we wanted to add to that November meeting?
That's entirely left with you, Chairman. I would suggest that the monitoring of the Highways Partner contract might take up a large proportion of the meeting anyway.
Okay, let's leave it at the 2 agenda items then, Highways Partner contract and flood risk management, which again is been brought to us by members of the public. We just need to remember with that it's a Staffordshire-wide risk management and it's not local. We're not looking at it locally. Councillor David Smith, did you have a question?
Well, Chairman, I apologise if something was mentioned I didn't hear when I was crossing the... But I note that the climate change annual report is now no longer coming to this committee. we were assured at our early meetings of this new committee, I think in the July meeting, that this was the most appropriate committee for it to come to. And I'm very disappointed to see that it's gone elsewhere. And I wondered whether you'd been consulted, Chairman, and who had made the decision for it not to come to this committee, because I think something relating to climate change and prosperous Staffordshire is quite vital that we should be considering something here. Thank you, Chairman.
Jonathan, are you able to answer the reasoning for that one?
I understood from a conversation with Nick Pountney, my colleague, that an agreement had been reached between the two chairmen of Prosperous and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee that Corporate would be the ideal place for it to be considered.
It was suggested we do it jointly, but I think Corporate took it. So there's nothing to say that we can't do something, but I think we just need to be careful about overlapping the work that they're doing. We did ask for a joint scrutiny on it, didn't we?
I think it's such an important issue, Chairman, with Corporate being the senior committee. They wanted to take ownership of it, so that's where we are.
My feeling is that if it was possible to have a joint meeting with Corporate, that would have been a very sensible thing for us to have done. We have a very considerable interest in climate change as a committee here, and I think for us, without any discussion at all, to find it's not coming to us is very, very disappointing. And so I would urgently recommend, Chairman, that we look at the possibility of a joint meeting to consider that item when it comes forward. I think it's going to be big enough to be a single meeting in its own right.
Yep, I mean, if you want to put that forward as a suggestion, Chairman, I'm happy to take that.
We'll take that outside of this meeting and look at how we can work that.
Okay. The next issue was the rearranging. Sorry.
Yeah. Saeed, Hussain?
I just wanted to second Councillor Smith's proposal, actually.
Yeah, we've already done that.
Sorry.
Sorry, carry on.
Okay, yeah, the next issue, Chairman, was just to highlight the rearranged date for the January meeting, basically to accommodate the Cabinet member who was unavailable on Friday the 14th.
What's the date now?
It's, you suggested Thursday the 13th of January PM, Chairman. Right, we've also identified a provisional date subject to your approval, Chairman, for the inquiry day into the community transport and supported bus network, which is Friday the 21st of January.
Yeah.
It did originally clash with, I think it was a meeting of the Countryside and Rights of Way panel, but we've managed to move that, so hopefully it's acceptable to everybody. Just to update you as well, Chairman, the visit that I think it was Councillor Smith proposed to the Apprentice Hub, HS2. We've heard this week from HS2 who've been coordinating with one of their strategic partners to find a couple of acceptable dates. They put forward Thursday the 7th of October AM and Friday the 8th of October AM. Unfortunately, Friday the 8th clashes with another meeting with Crow panel, but from what I can see in the calendar, Thursday the 7th is free, so if that's acceptable to everybody. Time to be arranged, really. Yeah, I mean, that's acceptable. That's.
Yeah, what we'll do is Councillor Hutton will get Jonathan to send out the date, the time and the location with the postcode, so we all know where we're going. For those people that did, I don't know who indicated, I know I indicated and Councillor Smith indicated that they wanted to go. So if you do want to go, you need to get that into Jonathan Lindop so he can coordinate how many numbers are going. So that's Thursday the 7th of October, time to be confirmed. 10 o'clock sounds good.
That's been... It's been cancelled, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I think that's it, Chairman. Other than following the meeting this morning, from my understanding, you've added the KPIs for the HWRC contract item to your list of matters to be programmed, and also the Safer Roads Partnership, which you want to scrutinise again. So I'll add those to the table.
Okay. Brilliant. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, members. We have gone a little over time today, but I think we've covered some important agendas. So I'll close the meeting at 12:40. Thank you very much.